I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hey, folks, welcome to the program today. Thank you so much for being with us. My name is Paul, and you have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality where we are building a liberty machine. Thank you so much for being with us. We got a great show for you. Now, coming up, we'll be talking with Tim Loggins from the Patriots Fact 746. Going to get an update on where, some gun legislation is. Where are we with that? Are there, is there any chance that, some of those bills that we've talked about in the past that have been reluctant to be run, are they dead now? What else is going on? You know what I mean? We definitely have a situation with our gun rights here in Arkansas where, constitutional carry's now been affirmed by both chambers of the legislature, affirming with a circuit court decision, Taft versus the state of Arkansas, about being a constitutional carry state. No permit is required, open or concealed. So it's actually really been I think, very productive just in that alone. But we'll talk to Tim, get a little update on that. Then coming up at 7:33, State Representative Vivian Flowers, Democrat State Representative Vivian Flowers, going to be on the program to talk about her bill on transparency. Matter of fact, let me pull this thing up real quick. This is a bill that made the Conduit scorecard. We talked about it briefly yesterday. It's HB 1928 to amend the Freedom of Information Act of 1967 and to require all open public meetings to be recorded. That sounds like a great idea, right? To require all open public meetings to be recorded. So essentially at this point, it's a no-brainer with the technology that is out there that makes perfect sense to record public meetings so that other people can go back and watch what the public officials are doing in the people's name, right? Makes perfect sense. It's a transparency at all levels of government. It makes perfect sense because this is this is our right to know. We have a right to know. And not all of us can take time off of work and go listen to their meetings. Trust me, speaking of meetings, and then we'll talk to Josh Waters once again. There was some very interesting stuff that happened yesterday. Very interesting stuff that happened. Let me tell you, yesterday in the House Revenue and Tax Committee, there was a situation where they went ahead and passed the internet sales tax. Now, within that internet sales tax bill, that's going to take more money out of your pocket, meaning your online purchases are going to increase. More money's going to the government. They also put, corporate tax reform in there, lowering the corporate tax reform or lowering the corporate tax rate over time from, 6.9 to 5.9. A lot of people are going to support that. Chamber of Commerce, the Municipal League, saying this is their number one priority. Okay, so that's why I think that's why it passed. There was some debate over the car wash portion of the legislation, and they talked about and I can't. This was the frustrating part to me as well. Listening to Senator Bart Hester, and you know what, we're going to get to some of that audio probably coming up at 7. Listening to Senator Bart Hester talk about how the task force talked about car washes and what's the best way to do, how do we make it equal? How do we make the car washes that do vacuum cleaning and the car washes that are automated that don't actually physically touch a car? How do we make that equal? Because everybody in the state has been protesting, their local governments, and they've been protesting down at the Marble Palace for some politician somewhere to fix this grave injustice about full car services, full car wash or full service car washes versus non-full service. Who knew this was a giant issue, one of the giant political issues of our day? And who knew that the solution is to tax your water? That's the solution, to tax the water a non-full service car wash uses. That's the solution. We got some creative geniuses down there, man. Let me tell you something. We've got creative geniuses. Now, they may not get creative and figure out how to cut spending. They may not get creative and figure out how to actually get the people net tax relief, but they certainly will get creative when it comes to finding new ways to tax us. These guys are they're out of this world in terms of, they're world-class taxers is what they are. The telephone number, 870-275-9799. And we'll bring you that audio as well. But I was watching the Public Health Committee yesterday. They, of course, defeated State Representative Josh Miller's bill, HB 1929, which would have taken this state from a private option, Arkansas Works, basically a weekly publisher's clearinghouse check to Blue Cross Blue Shield. I mean, that's what it is. Medicaid expansion is what we're talking about. And he was saying, look, it's very expensive to give Blue Cross Blue Shield $600 a month per person, regardless of whether or not a Medicaid population is going to the doctor or not, in the form of private insurance policies. So Josh Miller, he's like, well, I know I've been against Medicaid expansion, but we lost. We lost. It's here, and it's costing us a lot of money. So at this point, doesn't it make sense for us to go to a fee-for-service model, meaning treat the expansion population just like we treat the truly needy in our state? And I want to remind you that the Medicaid expansion population is for able-to-work adults with no dependents, and many of whom choose not to work. And we have this other population that we admit, the Medicaid, the original Medicaid population, the truly needy, the most vulnerable, the ones who can help themselves. And most Arkansans, myself included, have no problem attempting to help them with government assistance because they cannot help themselves. And we are a very, very wealthy state, wealthy country by the world standards. Arkansas is actually, as we said yesterday, we're the 17th most taxed state and the 44th in income. And those two numbers are like an albatross around our neck, in my opinion. But I was stunned. I was listening to some of the debate, and I think there were some good questions. Once DHS got involved and came to the end of the table where Josh Miller was sitting, it just got really boring and also a little comical because DHS's own arguments, that they are basically exposing themselves. This is a scam, okay? The private option was and still is a scam on the taxpayer, period. That's what it is. It is corporate welfare. We had no business giving away all of this money to insurance companies. And then the insurance companies, what do they do with that money? What PACs do they fund, right? I reference you to the Conduit for Commerce Follow the Money report, and you can see what kind of impact this has had on our state. This is a scam. I'm going to keep saying this. This is not right. It's been a scam from the beginning. And I'm telling you, it's actually heartbreaking that Republicans who passed this and were the architects of this tried to make the argument, well, this is the free market. No, there's a difference between being pro-market and pro-business. And you guys were pro-cronyism, crony capitalism, picking winners and losers, and Blue Cross Blue Shield and other insurance companies were the winners. It's a scam. It makes no sense. And so, there were some good questions, but access to care kept coming up. Access to care in this debate yesterday about whether to do what is demonstrably cheaper at this point and only pay for poor people when they go to the doctor versus pay if they don't. And we're talking about access to care. let me remind you that if the access to care that the truly needy have is good enough for the truly needy and it's free, then access to care under in putting the expansion population and treating them just like we treat the truly needy should be just as good for able to work adults who are healthy and young. Now, maybe I'm the only one that thought that was just a little ridiculous. I'm supposed to sit down with State Representative Josh Miller later today. I'll tell you what he says. We'll probably have that for you tomorrow. Matter of fact, let's just actually hear from Josh right now. Let's go to the sound bites here, Joe. This is from the House Revenue and Tax Committee. I'm sorry, this is from the House Public Health Committee. Sorry, Joe, the House Public Health Committee. We're going to start there at that first cut. This is Josh Miller opening for his bill at around 10:33, and listen to this, folks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Anyway, this bill may seem to be complicated, but it's really not. It's really hard for me to believe that I'm sitting down here presenting a Medicaid expansion bill. I think my record has been pretty clear on that. But at some point, you have to face reality. And the reality is that in 2013, we passed Medicaid expansion and did the private insurance model. It was a novel idea, but it has gotten expensive. And so what my bill proposes to do is that on July 1st of 2020, we will end the private insurance coverage for the folks that are signed up on Medicaid expansion and shift that population to Medicaid fee-for-service. I don't want anyone to lose their coverage. I don't want anyone who qualifies to not be able to sign up for coverage. I want to be very clear about that up front. I am not trying to take coverage away from one single soul. And again, that's hard for me to say, but it's reality. I think that if we're going to keep Medicaid expansion, and obviously we are, then we need to do it the most efficient and affordable way possible. We, after looking at the private insurance model that we have done, we're spending almost $600 a month, 570 something, I believe, a month per person that's signed up on this program, whether they go to the doctor or the hospital or not. That's what we're spending to the insurance companies. The insurance companies, it's written in the law that they have to spend at least 80% of their money on medical loss. Now, when I hear that, I'm figuring that they're probably not spending much more than what they're required by law. That leaves them 20%. You can call it administrative cost, you can call it profit, whatever you want to call it. It is, we're spending $2 billion a year on this program. 20% of $2 billion is $400 million. $400 million. That's not going to take care of sick people or folks in need of health care. That's being spent this year. Now, another angle of this bill is it creates a task force. And I may have just vomited a little bit in my mouth when I said that.
That's fantastic.
It creates a task force to study Medicaid reimbursement rates. We'll have members of the legislature and members of each Medicaid provider type on the task force. This needs to be done. Medicaid reimbursement rates are horrible. And by another thing, by us doing the private insurance model, we've created 2 tiers of Medicaid recipients. Those with private insurance are able to get into more doctors and more specialty treatments than our new Medicaid patients in many cases. And understandably so, the providers are taken care of better by the insurance companies. However, and I'm not up here trying to start a war with the insurance companies. I'm not hating on the insurance companies. But I know in my business, sometimes I have to change who I do business with due to cost. And that's basically where we're at as a state right now.
All right, stop. That's State Representative Josh Miller. His bill did not pass. Obviously, I mean, after he got finished opening for his bill, then there's a few questions, and then of course DHS comes down there, and when DHS gets down there, it just gets real boring because they're basically this. They got to protect they got to protect this relationship. Josh Miller saying, I'm not at war with the insurance companies. I'm pretty sure the insurance companies would disagree with him. I'm pretty sure the insurance companies would disagree with him. Because the fact of the matter is, the insurance companies now are, in all likelihood, addicted to us, the taxpayer, funding their scheme here. I mean, that's what this is. It's a scheme. It's a scam. It's been this way since 2013. Everything I've said about this program has turned out to be true. This is nothing that they've said about the program has turned out to be true either. It's so sad because it's our money being taken from us and given to insurance companies. And the goal that they used was we have to take care of sick people. Or the left would say healthcare is a right. Okay, whatever. And you now are trying to take, let's just say we are taking care of sick people, even though they're able to work adults. Young, healthy, no dependents. Let's just say that that's the case. Okay. Well, we're at this point, we're now taking care of them in a way that is much less efficient, and it's a much less prudent use of taxpayer dollars than the traditional fee-for-service model. And that's why this is such a big deal. You understand what a big deal it is? State Representative Josh Miller, who's consistently voted against the private option, Arkansas Works, Medicaid expansion, whatever they want to call it now. You understand what a big deal it is for him to go to the end of the table and said, yeah, we lost. We lost. It's not going anywhere. It's here to stay. Ronald Reagan is right. The closest thing to eternal life on this side is a government program. People are now addicted to it, or they've come accustomed to having insurance. Like we can't get rid of it now. Now, I actually think eventually monetarily we're going to have to get rid of it. I still subscribe to that theory, but it's a huge deal for him to go down. We lost. So now that we lost, I'm now going to look at this from a conservative fiscal standpoint, which is something that even the governor said without the work requirements. Without the work requirements, this thing is fiscally unsustainable, or it's unsustainable. And now what are we doing? Well, we've got to keep. By the way, they passed the budget. They passed out of the full House yesterday. They passed the Arkansas Works appropriation after voting it down on Friday, because over the weekend, if you work over the weekend, you can find a way to lose courage. If you work over the weekend, a lot can happen. The governor talked to them privately, gave them no assurances, though, that the Trump administration is going to appeal this. I mean, we still have no idea. The Arkansas House yesterday, by approving the Medicaid expansion budget after the Arkansas Works requirements have been struck down by a judge, essentially said, we don't want the responsibility to have to deal with a big problem at the end of session. We'll wait another year. And maybe we'll see what we can do then. But we don't want to rock the boat right now. We don't want to deal. Honestly, that vote yesterday was the Arkansas House of Representatives not doing their job. And listen, I know you're going to say it's an $8 billion budget. It was more than Arkansas Works. It was. But there were some people that raised the question like they used to say all the time, well, we can just separate the appropriation. Why don't we have separate votes on the appropriation? Let's approve the rest of DHS's budget, but let's kind of hold up on the Arkansas Works until we get some more questions answered. You cannot tell me that the Hutchinson administration knows any more than the House knows at this point, knows any more than the Senate knows any more than anybody else. The Trump administration, the Justice Department didn't, according to the paper this morning, did not return request for comment on whether or not they're going to appeal the decision. You have the Trump administration saying they want Obamacare to go away. They're saying now we want the whole law struck. So what do you think? I mean, I'm not saying that means that the Trump administration isn't going to appeal this, but I'm saying there's a lot we don't know, and there's a lot we need to know before we go forward with this decision. But we're right at the end of the session. And just like in 2015, when there was all of these secret numbers that were held back, a lot of people don't remember this, but at the end of 2015 session, back when the governor and Senator Jim Spendren got his phony SB 96 through, where he told everybody that it was going to end Medicaid expansion, and well, what am I even talking about now? Clearly, he was wrong. It didn't end Medicaid expansion. Oh, you know what? We've got to go to break. I'm just blathering on and on. We're going to go to break and be back here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
To the program, we've got Dan Subotnick. He's a professor of law at Touro Law School in Central Islip, New York. Dan, welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Now, are you a former talk radio host? Did I hear something about that?
No, but I'll accept an offer.
That's fantastic. Well, sorry, I guess I got my facts confused there. But you are a professor of law, but more importantly, You are the author of a book called Toxic Diversity, Race, Gender, and Law Talk in America. Dan Subotnick, tell us about this book, Toxic Diversity. What made you want to write this?
Well, this book arose out of an idea that I have had many years ago, that people weren't speaking honestly about gender and race.
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
I will remind you, now we're up against another hard break because I went long. You'll have to forgive me. This is our cover to the 92nd General Assembly. The courage that the Arkansas House of Representatives had in holding up the DHS appropriation on Friday left them because somebody started a rumor that former Speaker Davy Carter was going to come back and make them continue voting on it over and over and over again until it passed, and so they gave up. Telephone number is 870-275-9799. Yeah, I mean, back in 2015, folks, there was all these numbers that were hidden, meaning redeterminations, the fact that the Arkansas wasn't following federal law. You remember all of this? And then right after the session ended, all of a sudden, all the numbers came out, and you thought maybe the Arkansas Works model or the precursor to Arkansas Works wouldn't have passed in 2015 had the legislature had the information that they had then. And that's what I'm wondering, with the judge striking this decision down, what if there's more that we don't know, but as soon as session ends, we lose the constitutional authority to do something about it?
I did a lot. I've written a lot about it, and I saw so much evidence to that effect that I decided to take a bunch of things that I had been writing and bring them up to date, and I published this book. But again, it's all born out of the understanding that what we read about race and gender is specious, and it has to be interrogated, and that's what you guys are doing. That's what I do, and it's got to be done.
So when I just read, and I haven't read your book, but when I read the title, Toxic Diversity, one of the things that I've kind of come to accept, and this is a critical view of this idea of diversity, is because when I was right out of college, I worked for a university for a short time, and I quickly realized that diversity means people who look different but think the same. Can you speak to that?
Well, think the same with respect to each other, or with respect to the larger community. I mean, I need to know what you have in mind.
Well, from what I can tell, is diversity. When people talk about, well, we need to diverse, they're really just talking about looks. They're not talking about ideas. They're not talking about ideas.
That's true. That's absolutely true. And we don't have. A lot of people have commented on it. It's almost a cliche now to say we don't have diversity of intellectual interests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean they want. And do you see this as a left-right paradigm? You know, where we have people.
Yes, I do. It's the left that's squeezing to virtually eliminate all kinds of conversations about gender and again race. Sure, the right is much more willing to accept these kinds of conversations, and so the squeeze is from the left for sure.
Were you following what happened recently with Jussie Smollett case in Chicago?
Yes. And
so,
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, when we talk about race and we talk about gender, I think gender applies here because he was calling himself the gay Tupac. But it all, to me, I think it might have woken a lot of people up, Dan, in terms of people who think that, this country is just, full of a bunch of, racist, homophobic people. At least exposes this as an issue to use, a fake issue to use to, to galvanize the public. It might be one of these moments where people are like, "Oh my gosh, this is getting out of hand."
I think you're right to an extent. I wouldn't go as far as.
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Good morning to everybody out there. I hope that you have a fantastic day. If you're listening to this program, well, thank you for listening to this program. Please tell your friends about Conduit News Radio. You can find out more at conduitnews.com. Folks, there's a group out there called the Patriots Vac 746, and you've heard me at this point talk about them a bunch. I want to commend them for the work they've done. I want to tell you that if you want to be a part of a grassroots organization that is focusing on your Second Amendment rights, your rights here in the state of Arkansas specifically, your liberty when it comes to, honestly, Thomas Jefferson said an educated citizenry is indispensable to the proper functioning of government. I think it's maybe I botched that a little bit, but it's indispensable. And so we got to have people out there educated, and that's what the Patriots Vac 746 is there for. They're advocating and educating about, the fact that we're a constitutional carry state, which means that you don't have to have a permit to carry a gun, open or concealed, here in the state of Arkansas. And if you want to know more, go to the Patriots Vac 746 Facebook page. You go to Facebook, you search for Patriots Vac 746 and ask to become a member of the group. It's a closed group, but they'll grant you access, and then you're going to have access to a whole plethora of people who are on it. Then you probably need to go to one of their meetings. Matter of fact, here to talk more about that, as always, we got Tim Loggins on the line. Tim, how are you this morning?
Good morning, Paul. I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm I'm very weary, at times because I've been, covering this 92nd General Assembly for a while now, since January 14th, and it's kind of dragging on, and I'm wondering, what are they going to try to do at the last minute? But for the most part, I'm optimistic, and just want to give people the truth. That's what I'm optimistic about, Tim. Is I just want to give people the truth of what's happening and just kind of let the chips fall where they may at this point. And Tim, I know you've been covering all of this gun legislation since this is all kicked off.
I've been trying to. There's been so much. It's hard to keep track of, but we're doing the best we can, and had pretty good results so far.
Yeah, obviously we've got the victories for the constitutional carry, clarifying gun rights. That's fantastic. Where you have both houses basically, making sure everybody knows about a 2013 law that essentially, a court case and a 2013 law that essentially affirms our right to open carry or concealed carry without a permit, without a permission slip from the government. And that's a big deal. There's a big difference, Tim, between being pro-gun and pro-permit or concealed carry permit, isn't there?
Huge difference, Paul. There's still some bad gun bills out there that are coming down, this week or next week. Two of them come to mind, SB 660. It's an attempt by Senator Garner to clean up the so-called enhanced carry law and to modernize, I believe is the title, the concealed carry handgun license law. It's a bad bill. Again, it's the ideology of you need a permit. And there's another one by Senator Trent Garner's SB 223, which grants a waiver to people an emergency to get a license, someone that's a victim of domestic abuse. And, I'd like to call on Senator Garner right now to pull that bill and hold a press conference and say, hey, guys, I filed this, I wrote this back when it was unclear, but now we have the law. You don't need a permit, victims of domestic violence. You can carry your handgun right now. You don't need a permit. You don't need the government's permission. Things like that, Paul, we've been fighting as much as we've been fighting for good legislation, making sure that we don't lose any ground and that we spread this message. No permit is needed to carry a weapon, concealed or unconcealed. Trent Garner wants to be a Second Amendment advocate. Then get on board with what the law says.
Interesting.
Let's quit misleading people.
That one about if you're a victim of domestic violence, you get a fast-track concealed carry permit. That was fascinating to me, considering I'm pretty sure when Scott Flippo's resolution to clarify gun rights, I think Trent voted for that.
That is correct, Paul. And you want to talk about mixed messages. Are you for the people's right to keep and bear arms? Do you believe in Article 2, Section 5 of the Arkansas Constitution? Do you believe Act 746 did what the Senate and the House voted in that resolution to say it did, which you don't need a permit? Do you believe that or not? And if you do believe it, does that mean that you're trying to change it? Paul, let's be honest with folks. Let's stop the manufactured confusion. I call on Senator Garner to pull SB 223, and I call on him to pull SB 660. The enhanced carry license is unconstitutional. It violates Article 2, Section 2, Article 2, Section 5. It's a bad bill. Article 2, Section 18. These are attempts by the establishment to continue this CHCL program, and we need to stop that. You don't need a permit in Arkansas.
We also don't need anything that could remotely weaken the status, the freedom that the people have right now when it comes to open carry or concealed carry. And that's, to me, especially as we get closer and closer to the end of the session now, a week away or so. You never know, right? I mean, I know one thing, Tim. The establishment, the people in positions of power, they might not admit it openly. Not all of them, but they. I'm talking about Arkansas State Police, the Sheriff's Association. They don't like the fact that the people have the freedom right now to carry a gun without checking in with the government first.
Well, I don't think they like it, Paul, but they understand the law. We were down at the Capitol Monday. We had Matt, I believe his name was Matt Moser, with the National Association of Gun Rights. They're coming into Arkansas.
Really?
Yes, sir. They reached out to us last week and said, hey, we don't really have a presence in Arkansas. We would like to establish one. And so we talked to them a little bit, and we met their representative, Matt, at the Capitol Monday, and introduced him to a great number of legislators. And, Paul, we seem to think that legislators aren't on board with this, but we met probably 60 or more legislators Monday. Every one of them was shaking our hands, and every one of them acknowledged 746, constitutional carry. Every one of them, we're on board with what we're doing, friendly, open arms, establishing those relationships. We're making a big difference. Lawmakers know what 746 did in 2013. And, I talked about Senator Garner's bad bills that appear to be good. We've defeated a lot of legislation. Representative Garner's filed 3 bills that basically are taking steps backwards on our gun rights. We defeated the red flag law. We've defeated some bad legislation, and the legislators are on board with that. They understand that Arkansas, and Arkansans cherish their gun rights.
Hey, will you remind us? That's a big deal, and we do need to give the legislature credit there. Thank them for defeating the red flag legislation. This was something that the governor came out and said he was open to late last year, that he was open to red flag laws. Funny, interesting. It would have been very interesting to see what would have happened if he would have said that or taken that position during his Republican primary against Jan Morgan. If he'd have come out and said, I'm for red flag laws. Tim, remind us of how many rights in the Bill of Rights a red flag law violates.
Top of my head, Paul, 1st, 2nd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 14th, and possibly more. That's just top of my head.
That's incredible.
Direct violation. Yeah, and it's crazy to think that we were that close to having red flag in Arkansas, and it's pretty interesting. Matt's headquartered out of Colorado, Matt Moser, with National Association of Gun Rights, and Colorado just enacted red flag laws. That was a huge defeat for the citizens of Colorado. And Matt was concerned Arkansas was going to, accept the red flag laws as well. And I think Arkansas pleasantly surprised him to see what grassroots efforts have done in the state.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. And that's really what it's been, and I know you guys have had your Patriots, VAC 746 meetings. There was one this past Saturday in Conway. I understand that was a success. I know you head up the Northeast Arkansas chapter. You got any meetings coming up that the folks need to know about, Tim?
I don't have the schedule in front of me, Paul, but, last weekend we had Senator Mark Johnson and Representative Spencer Hawks and Representative Meeks. They came to the meeting, 50-plus folks there in Conway, showed up to learn about their gun rights. We have one basically every weekend somewhere in Arkansas. Join the page. You can get the schedule that way. And it's just grassroots folks. It's everyday folks. And Paul, we're having I can't tell you the success and how exciting the times are. In addition to meeting all the legislators Monday, we met with the lieutenant governor. He welcomed us in his office. He come on in, guys, talk to me. Let's talk about gun rights. And we didn't have to pass a background check or, submit a bio or wait a month. He welcomed us with open arms. What a difference a couple of years makes.
Good. That's fantastic. We're talking with Tim Loggins. I tell you what's interesting. I was hearing a radio discussion the other day. I think I was listening to the Dave Ellswick show, and I was listening to Jan Morgan yesterday talking about. Did you follow that bump stock ban at all? And how people are supposed to turn in their bump stocks now. Have you heard about this?
I have and followed it. Personally, I don't own any weapons or bump stocks. I lost all of mine in a great flood a couple of years ago. So. It doesn't affect me personally.
What's crazy is there's so many people who've lost their bump stocks. It's like I lost my bump stock. I was digging a hole in my backyard and I lost it. I don't know where it is. There's a lot of people who they just come up missing. It's interesting. It's like, but I find that interesting how. There does. Obviously, I believe that yours was lost in a flood, Tim. But I do think it's interesting that there are some who are just saying, "I'm not turning mine in. That's ridiculous," and they're saying no. And for a long time, I've wondered if there was ever some sort of national gun confiscation, or they made it was like, hey, if you're caught with a gun, you're not supposed to have. You're going to jail for 25 years, mandatory minimum sentence, or something like that. Like how many of us would just say, okay, here's my gun? I don't think that's the case anymore. I mean, I really do think if that were to ever happen, people would, I think some would turn them in, but I don't think it'd be as many. I don't think it'd be as many as I thought at one time. You know what I mean?
Paul, this highlights how we win this fight for our Second Amendment. We cannot win it on the national level. We got to do it county by county, state by state, representative and senator by representative and senator. And we nullify federal overreach at the local level. I mean, we're at 16 states right now that are constitutional carry. Before the end of this session, we could be 22 states in the United States that are constitutional carry. That's how many states are taking up this legislation.
Wow.
You do it one state at a time. The feds cannot enforce gun control without the state's cooperation.
True.
And that's how we win this battle. We secure our rights by having these conversations, educating the public, and shifting that over to the window, dragging it back from the left where it's been misplaced and bringing it back to the center and say, hey, guys, this is a right. Mm-hmm. It's not a privilege. And you do that state by state. And we're winning that battle on the state level, Paul. Groups like, OK2A and Patriots Vac 746 and Bama Carry, groups on the state level are winning. And by the way, that's why National Association of Gun Rights is in Arkansas, because the NRA doesn't get it. They want to compromise our rights away. And that's why the NRA is not relevant anymore in Arkansas.
Yeah. Yeah, and I also think, kind of back to the red flag law, that one red flag law that they have in Maryland, and that guy just got killed. I mean, the cops killed that guy. I think when stuff like that makes headlines, you realize just how unpractical going house to house and taking someone's firearms are. I mean, that was just one case where they used a red flag law to try to convict a guy before he's been charged with anything. So let's go take his guns away, even though he's done nothing wrong. And then the cops end up shooting the guy dead in his house. That's just,
Absolutely.
And if that's happening in Maryland, what do you think would happen in Arkansas? You know what I mean? Where on opening day of deer season, there's 300,000 people in trees, with that know how to use high-powered rifles. You know what I mean? I guess when you really think of the sheer numbers, it's just not practical to even think about. I mean, I know that's what the left wants to do, but it's just not something that would work out well, I don't think.
Well, I want to say this, Paul. I encourage the listeners to get involved locally with their sheriff's races. There's a sheriff in Colorado that said, I'll go to jail in my own jail before I enforce red flag laws.
Yes.
Talk to your sheriff. And if your sheriff's not willing to make that constitutional stand, replace him. It's that simple.
Yeah.
We need sheriffs that exercise their full authority and stand up to their oath. And right now in Arkansas, we probably got maybe 10 or 15 that will. Maybe out of 75.
Yeah.
We need to be having that conversation on the county level.
Wow.
And I also want to thank, Senator Linda Collins last session, back last October, Representative Dwight Tosh. They allowed us to get out in front of the red flag argument. When the governor said he was open to it, we were able to testify to a joint judiciary committee, and we defeated red flag then, back in October of last year. We got that information out there. We were able to talk to legislators on the judiciary, and they realized what a bad deal it was. And it's all about getting out in front on these bad issues. And we were able to do that thanks to Senator Linda Collins and Representative Dwight Tosh. So it didn't have a chance of passing this session.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, Tim, we're out of time, sir, but it's always great to talk to you, man. And I look forward to coming to another one of those meetings. Just because they were so engaging. So I really appreciate it.
Well, we're going to have one sometime around probably the last weekend in April, Paul. I'm going to invite you to it. It's probably going to be in Paragould. So right. Be listening for it and
okay.
Looking forward to seeing you again.
All righty. Tim Loggins with the Patriots Vac 746. I appreciate it, sir. Thank you so much.
Thanks, buddy.
All righty. Have a great day. Folks, there is a bond issue, which essentially is a tax increase, $2,700 per household. That's in a special election in Fayetteville. And they got the city of Fayetteville has a long wish list of things they want to do, things they want to build. And so they're using a special election to pass these bonds. I think it'd be $2,700 per person or per household if you live in the city of Fayetteville. Election day is April 9th, but early voting is kicking off today. or this week, I believe. So you definitely want to. Early voting is going on now. Let's just say that it's going on right now. So if that's something that if you know anybody in Fayetteville or there's anybody in Fayetteville listening, just wanted you to know that that's what's going on. It's new debt. It's ridiculous, and this kind of goes to this idea that we now have a situation in Arkansas that the cities can imitate Big Brother, meaning the state can go into all this debt, finance all these bonds, do these super projects when they come about, when the opportunity is there. And now counties and cities can do the same thing. This is a recipe for disaster. I know everything's going great in the economy right now, but we don't know. We don't know. We're not promised tomorrow. We don't know what's going to... When these local communities start to get into this bond game, we're talking, this is seriously going to over leverage it. This is a serious, serious problem. And you've got to remember, Arkansas went bankrupt once in the 30s over this very issue of debt. And bond issues are a debt that politicians a lot of times don't like to admit are debts, right? It's not like we didn't balance our budget this year. That's like headlines. Even the mainstream media are going to attack you on that. But no, it's a bond, so it's okay. Folks, it's got to stop, If limited government can't work in Fayetteville, and I know Fayetteville's a liberal city, but if limited government can't work in Arkansas, what hope does it have in Washington, D.C.? You know what I'm saying? I mean, this is just common sense, right? If we can't get it to work here in Arkansas, I mean, think about where we live. Think about the quality. Think about your neighbors. And yet, the politicians that we are sending from this population of Arkansas, a lot of them, they go down to that Marble Palace and they just get marble fever. I mean, it's just something that happens to them, and we're seeing a lot of it now. That we're still got some good ones down there that stand up to it. That are, some of them are immune to marble fever. Those are the guys that just will kind of put a piece of duct tape on a red button down there on their desk, like, just, I'm going to vote no on everything. I'm joking. There's some things they vote yes for. All right, we're going to take a break. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. We've got more to get to. We're going to be talking with State Representative Vivian Flowers, a Democrat. She's going to be on the program coming up at 7:33 to talk about her transparency bill, recording all public meetings. That's a very good idea. So we want to support good ideas here on this program. That's what we're about. The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Also going to hear more from Josh Waters. I know he was on the program yesterday, but you're not going to believe, folks, the Department of Finance and Administration. Now, I know it probably didn't matter. Let me just say this on the out front. The House Revenue and Tax Committee wants to tax the people more via internet sales tax. And they also, some of them, want the corporate income tax reform. And so they didn't really care. But the Department of Finance and Administration deceived a legislative committee yesterday. Or they misled them. I mean, deceived or misled, unintentionally, intentionally, unintentionally. I don't know. It's really hard to say. But I just want you to know the fact of the matter is, using the Department and Finance Administration's own numbers and adding and doing math, you get to a net tax increase on the Internet Sales Tax 2.0 bill. And then DF&A goes down to the end of the table, and DF&A admits those are their own numbers, and then attempts to claim that Mr. Josh Waters just made up a number, even though the conclusive number is based on their own numbers. It's weird. It's just flat out wrong is what it is. Anyway, we're going to take a break. Be back here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, You believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas. Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799.
I would say there is an issue there. There certainly is an issue about kind of anti-minority feeling. But at the same time, there's the other issue there that needs to be discussed, the manipulation by minorities of public discourse. And both have to be on the table at the same time.
Well, so how do you square that? Let's talk about that. I mean,
that's hard to square.
It is. I mean, I'm not saying there are no examples of racism or anti-minority sentiment, but I am the guy that's going to say, hey, listen, 8 years after September 11th, where terrorists knocked down our buildings, flew planes into our buildings, America elected a black guy by the name of Barack Hussein Obama. Not once, then they elected him twice. And I feel like that counts for something when in terms of saying that,
exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
You heard the saying taxed enough already. What about taxed too much already? I think when all the math is done at the end of this legislative session, it's going to be pretty clear that this session will mark in history where Arkansas just went a little too far. The tipping point. I think we have folks that have no idea the consequences of what's about to happen here in this state because of our tax structure. Not structure, rather, tax code, or just the amount of money. Listen. What's the definition of a tax cut? A tax cut means less money going to the government, more money in your pocket. If you lower your taxes here, but you raise them over here more than you cut them, then now that's a tax increase. That's very, very easy to understand. And anybody that has to run a household, take care of their family, and wonder, and is wondering, how they're going to make ends meet, you understand that. But when they're dealing with they're dealing with other people's money, and so they're less conservative with it. I mean, that's just a natural human tendency. We're going to take a break. We have one more hour coming your way next. Don't go anywhere. This is our continuing coverage of the 92nd General Assembly. This is Conduit News Radio. My name is Paul Harrell. Back in just a moment.
Southeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 1230 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
We have these racial problems that we've experienced in our past, the scars of our past, are not demonstrably better than what's portrayed in the mainstream media on a daily basis.
Well, I don't think anybody would disagree that things are better in terms of relations between minority and minority populations. But there's still problems, and serious problems. And the fact that they're better has actually encouraged people to speak up on the left and say, you know, we've gotten this far now, we've seen some progress, let's build on this and get more progress on the subject.
Yeah.
It's not inconsistent for those two things to exist at the same time.
What is, in your book, again, we're talking with Dan Subotnick.
Yeah.
He is a professor of law, and he's author of this book, Toxic Diversity, Race, Gender, and Law Talk in America. What's one of the main things you wanted to accomplish and communicate to the reader when you wrote this book?
Well, my latest thinking is on the subject of sexual assault, and in fact, the official title of this discussion that we're having is "Start by Believing." And so I wrote something recently, last few months, in which I challenged a number of feminists who said that we have to start by believing women. I don't think we have to start by believing women. I think we have to start by listening to women and evaluating what they have to say. And that's my message, and I've written it up for your readers might be interested in the Turo Law Review in the winter issue of this year. And there's been a lot of interest in this topic. There's no question that. Well, let me put it this way. I want to. Do I have a little time here?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
All right. So here's the thing. The argument by feminist activists is that we should listen to women. We should believe women at the outset. But here's the problem. The people who know, and there are very few people with direct experience on this. I'm going to quote from a woman who was a dean at a law school who sat in on all kinds of panels in which she was adjudicating the issue of sexual assault. And here's what she says. And she says this recently, not in 1960. She expected to find widespread comfort with sexuality and confidence and sexual pleasure. But what she discovered was seemingly bottomless pits of shame. Imagine this in 2019, bottomless pits of shame. And this, of course, turned into a lot of complaints about sexual assault. And then she goes on and explains. This shame can lead to the enforcement regime being activated to vindicate honor, to vindicate the woman's honor, to feel some guilt, intense guilt in some cases, over their sexual behavior, provide identities of sexual innocence. Maybe mom thinks I wasn't playing by the rules, and so I'm going to say I was raped. Protect against jealousy. Protect young women from falling from someone's grace. Protect them from falling from good to slut. It's unbelievable. I mean, there are almost no people in America who are writing about what's going on the ground, in the trenches, in the adjudication trenches, both in the law school, not the law schools, the colleges and universities generally, and in the police department. I recently talked to a top cop in the area of sexual assault, and he says the same thing. Many women, not by no means all women, many women, enough to be worrisome. A number of women, he says, simply don't know what the criminal law says about sexual assault. What are the elements of sexual assault? And he finds this over and over again, and he wants this to get out to the public, as I'm doing here.
Okay, so when you say they don't understand the law, so maybe they're made uncomfortable around a man, and they somehow feel sexually threatened, and so they think that's a crime when there actually is no crime. That there is no.
Well, I think that's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
interesting.
That's what he's saying.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, what did you think about the Brett Kavanaugh situation?
Well, my take, and let's see how it matches up with yours, is that Brett Kavanaugh was involved in some rough horseplay with this woman. There was no attempted rape. And he should not have been charged with it, and he should have gone through a little more smoothly. I'm not saying he was a good guy. I mean, what he did was bad, but he was 17 years old at the time, and maybe we can forgive him since he's led a more or less a blameless life since. So,
well, I see.
Yes,
if something did happen,
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us. Hour number 2 here at the intersection of conservative ideas and reality, where we are building a liberty machine. Thank you so much for being with us. First, they came for Jumpin' Joe. You guys remember the Arkansas State University mascot, the Indians? You remember this? Well, when I was growing up in Northeast Arkansas, there were remnants of Jumpin' Joe. Then they moved to Runnin' Joe. Now, that was the first give, because Jumping Joe is this jumping caricature of an Indian holding a tomahawk and a scalp, a tomahawk in one hand and a scalp in the other. Matter of fact, pretty sure the copyright or whatever, that's all, the patent or whatever that would be is up on that. And so people are reprinting the Jumpin' Joe. It's becoming like a, cultural, almost like, if you have one of these logos or a hat with something, you're kind of old school. You know what I mean? Now, I personally love it because it's a logo that's not politically correct at all, right? Okay, so first they come for Jumpin' Joe, then they transition. Well, maybe he just should be running with a tomahawk, okay? Because then, of course, the NCAA gets involved because they're the moral arbiters of what's right and wrong, right? The NCAA, they're certainly the moral standard. Yeah, the NCAA, they've never done anything immoral or unethical or anything like that, have they? No. Well, they say, you can't be the Indians anymore and have that mascot because it's offensive, and then eventually, you can't even be the word Indians is offensive, and then of course, now the Arkansas State, they're the Red Wolves, and they've had a lot of obviously athletic success since that move in 2007, and it is what it is, Yeah, it's a good mascot too, but first they came for Jumpin' Joe, and now, now they're going for Civil War statues and everything else that finds them offensive. And now, according to campusreform.org, George Washington University students are doing away with their George Washington mascot. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. They want to remove and replace George the Colonial. That's right, the Colonial. Now, George the Colonial, or George Washington University, you'd think that'd be pretty much a no-brainer, but no, the Colonial is, he's a colonial, and that's colonialism, and that's oppressive, and it's American, and it's offensive. Huh, okay. Campus Reform asked George Washington University to comment on the matter. They didn't hear back from them, but the students have essentially voted to get rid of George Washington. This is exactly what I think President Trump has addressed this. Others have addressed this. We here in Arkansas a couple years ago, we decided to fuel this liberal progressive madness by separating Robert E. Lee Day from Martin Luther King Day. There were two men celebrated on the same day, and that was somehow racist, because you can't celebrate a black man and a white man on the same day, because that go against what Martin Luther King. Oh, wait. Interesting. Anyway, so they separated those days, and of course that's not enough, because now we've had 2 times now where the Confederate star on the Arkansas flag, one of 4 stars in the middle, United States, France, Spain, and the Confederacy. We want to change that now. Well, why? Well, to make people feel better, because there were Klansmen in the legislature in the 20s, and that's got to be why the star's on there. Okay, all right. So what's next? Well, we've got Civil War statue on the grounds of the Capitol. We're going to take that down? You betcha. See, this is madness. It is editing history, and there's just no place for it. Now, granted, I totally understand. Like, it's not like I don't support in a democratic process people being able to change, past symbols and everything like that. I understand that. Don't get me wrong. I get it. I'm not saying I don't support that, but what I am saying is it never ends. Okay, it never ends. Because you can say, well, we don't like slavery. Okay, all right. Well, let's accommodate you and let's remove the star, or let's accommodate you and remove the statue. Let's accommodate you and let's, Native American, it's offensive. Okay, so we won't be the Indians anymore. Okay, where does it end? And it doesn't. It goes back to the very foundation of the country and the word colonial and the name George Washington. So next, what is it? The American flag. So at some point, there's got to be an end. Even people who are on board with this train, at some point they're going to be like, wait a second, you're offended by the American flag? At what point do you just really want to found a new country? I mean, that's what this is really about, right? They really just want to end the country we have now and start a Marxist socialist one. That's the truth. Now, I'm not saying that, for example, State Representative Charles Blake, when he wants to get rid of the star and make it for Native Americans and everything else, Native Americans, and think, Did Native Americans, were they at war? Did a Native American ever do a bad thing? Oh, they did? Okay. Well, I'm sure we'll be offended by that at some point in the future, and we can rename the star again. I'm not suggesting that State Representative Charles Blake is a Marxist, although he is a Democrat. So at this point, they're definitely getting closer. But what I am suggesting, respectfully, is that I don't think he's thought it through. Where this thought process leads, if you game it out, where it actually leads. I don't think a lot of people on the left who will jump on board what is on their side popular political issues, I don't know if you've gamed it out far enough. I don't know if you actually have gamed it out far enough to where you realize that the people who are fueling this in that populist movement on the left really just want a brand new country. It's like they want a do-over, okay? And that is, that's not good, because I like my individual rights. I don't know about you, but the people on the left, they don't like freedom of speech, right? They want to shout you down or get violent. They don't like your individual rights. I'm not on board with that. And I'll just tell, this may be an extreme, but I'm talking on the far left. There's no way to publicly disagree with these people on the far left. If they had their way, I feel like the people that disagreed with them would wind up in camps with the male white privilege and that sort of thing that they're throwing out there, where it's like, well, I'm less of a person. Like, my opinion doesn't count because of the color of my skin. Haven't we been down this road before and decided that it was wrong? Oh, yeah, but Paul, you don't understand. There's just such a huge head start, and George Washington was a slave owner. Okay, all right, we're back to that again. Okay, I see. Telephone number 870-275-9799. And other university news, not that you woke up this morning and you were like, what are the universities doing? Yale Law School is yanking the stipends from students who work for Christian firms. That's right. Several weeks ago, according to Aaron Haviland, he writes that he wrote about the challenges of being a Christian and a conservative at Yale Law School. A few days ago, the law school decided to double down and prove my point after the Yale Federalist Society invited an attorney from the Alliance Defending Freedom, a prominent Christian legal group, to speak about the Masterpiece Cake Shop case. Conservative students faced backlash. Outlaws the law school's LGBTQ RSTLNE Would You Like to Buy a Vowel community group demanded that Yale Law School clarify its admissions policies for students who support the Alliance Defending Freedom positions. Additionally, Outlaws insisted that students who work for religious or conservative public interest organizations such as the Alliance Defending Freedom during their summers should not receive financial support from the law school. On March 25th, 1 month after the controversy, Yale Law School announced via email that it was extending its non-discrimination policy to summer public interest fellowships, postgraduate public interest fellowships, and loan forgiveness for public interest careers. The school will no longer provide financial support for students and graduates who work at organizations that discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity and expression. Yale based its decision on a unanimous recommendation from the school's Public Interest Committee. The committee explained, quote, "The logic of our broader recommendation is that Yale Law School does not and should not support discrimination against its own students financially or otherwise. Obviously, the law school cannot prohibit a student from working for an employer who discriminates, but that is not a reason why Yale Law School should bear any obligation to fund that work, particularly if that organization does not give equal employment opportunity to all of our students," end quote. The law school also thanked Outlaws for Race. See, even lawyers now are becoming communist and socialist because even lawyers, I guess, would just rather have a guaranteed basic income for all lawyers, right? Because the fact of the matter is there are different groups that have different beliefs. And if you're a Christian legal group, yes, there is still a place for you in our society. A Christian legal group probably is not going to be hiring an LGBT, RSTLN, would you like to buy a Val community? They're not going to hire a person from that community. In all probability, right? And that's discriminatory. It's like, well, but this is what their beliefs are, their religious beliefs. We don't care about freedom of religion. We're attorneys. Sorry. I know some good attorneys. I also know some attorneys that they hold their soul. This makes sense. I tried to tell this joke. Somebody told me a joke about attorneys, and they said this. They said, attorneys hold their soul in their hands over a fire. And then the successful attorneys, I don't know if this is true. This is just a bad attorney joke. Okay, so they hold their soul in one hand over a fire, and then they have a potato peeler in their other hand. And they just kind of slowly use the potato peeler on their soul over the fire. I don't know if that's, I'm just a talk radio host. Are there any jokes about us? 870-275-9799 is the telephone number if you would like to contribute to the conversation. Yesterday, the House Revenue and Tax Committee passed the internet sales tax on out-of-state sellers, but that's deceptive because they're not going to pay the tax. You're going to pay the tax. That's right. The government wants more money, and they're using Main Street brick-and-mortar small businesses as an excuse to raise your taxes. Of course, if you're a Main Street business and you're struggling right now because of the internet, how does me paying more money to the government help your small business? Answer, it doesn't. If you're, this is just the facts. Sorry, they're not telling the truth here. Now, Mr. Josh Waters decided to look into the numbers, and he's going to be on the program here in a little bit on this internet sales tax. He decided to look into the numbers, and guess what, folks? Their numbers, DFNA's own numbers, don't add up in terms of being revenue neutral. It's a net tax increase on the people. Of course, that's pretty obvious. But I'll tell you this much. DFNA is using a phony financial impact statement. And I know they tried to dispute that. You know what DFNA said yesterday about their phony financial impact statement? They're using the same financial impact statement that was for another piece of legislation, a draft bill that didn't have all of this other revenue generating language in it. And now they're saying, well, this financial impact statement was actually considering all of the new language that's going to generate more revenue, but even though it wasn't in the original bill. Really? That is insane. That still makes you guys look incompetent, by the way, because why would you put out a financial impact statement that is estimating more revenue than the bill would have either way? Either you're using a phony financial impact statement now, or you are using a phony financial impact statement then. both are equally unacceptable and raise questions as to whether you're a competent organization. Now, here's the truth. The Department of Finance and Administration, and we're going to play, is folks are actually they're actually just a political organization now. They are summarizing and trying to make political points and actually misleading legislative committees, which I think should be a crime. Here is Mr. Josh Waters yesterday. This bill passed at a committee. I think everybody knew it was. I think Josh Waters, just for the record, wanted to use DFNA's own numbers and make sure the committee knew what they were voting on. Here it is, Joe. Whenever you're ready, go for it.
Last week, and wanted to get that on paper. If I could ask questions, the accommodations intermediary piece taken out at this point, or is that part of the amendment?
How are you this morning?
Good, how are you?
Great.
Was the accommodations intermediary piece taken out? No, it's still in there?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. I was trying to follow the amendment, but wanted to mention that. I mentioned it briefly last week, but went and looked at the fiscal impact of the Senate version of that bill 628, and in the first year it's a $3.8 million tax increase, $5.3 million each year after that. So if you look at that handout, I just wanted to put it all out there, fiscal years over time in the first fiscal year, and these are DFNA numbers there at the top, and then I've included an additional estimate. I think, like I mentioned last week, the internet sales tax number is an underestimate there. But just looking at the DFNA numbers, you see fiscal year 2020, $42.5 million tax increase, $35.5 million in 2021, $18 million in 2022. And it's not until fiscal year 2027 that there's a net tax increase. So I think there's some confusion. This was a $30 million tax cut last time, but wanted to put those numbers out there and present them. Still opposed to it for the internet sales tax portion, but wanted to present these numbers to y'all, and I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. DFA, you got something you want to say on the numbers or anything? You good? Okay. Paul, go on the table and recognize yourself, please.
Okay, this is Paul Gehring from DFNA. He gets a lot of face time. He's going to speak to Josh's numbers now. Listen. Or DFNA's numbers. They're not Josh's numbers. They're DFNA's numbers.
We have reviewed the handout that the last speaker did provide, and the speaker provided an additional $57 million in additional revenues from collection of online sales taxes from retailers and online marketplace sellers. There is no explanation, analysis, or source of this information. When it comes to providing a fiscal impact statement for a tax change, DFA does a very diligent inquiry based upon the information that DFA has in terms of reporting from actual taxpayers. There was also a GAO study that was conducted within the last 2 years that did an estimate of state by state of additional tax collections if a state were to adopt a post-Wayfair type law. Our numbers that we provide are obviously conservative because they were relied heavily for purposes of budgeting. Without any source materials for this additional $57 million that the last speaker provided, I would find them to be highly suspect. And I would not put any confidence in those numbers.
Thank you, sir.
All right, that is DFNA.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
Just so you know, that's DFNA, and they are they really what they just said is they have no confidence in their own numbers. And Paul Gehring just misled a committee. He doesn't know where the $52 million figure came from, he says, that there's no source material for that. The sources are your own numbers, Paul. I feel like I'm talking to myself. The sources are your own numbers. And so you get down there and then you say, and listen, first of all, I just want you to know, we weren't the only ones that figured out what he had done there, right? There were other people that figured out what he had done. And we're like, I mean, if you, again, it was a handout. Yes, the handout was was, a bunch of numbers that were, put to bed that Josh compiled to hand out to the committee. Just say, hey, here's DFA's own numbers. We're doing, this number plus this number plus this number plus this number, and this is the number that you get. And DFA goes down there and says, no. Did you hear them? That they even admitted that their numbers are conservative, and that means conservative in the government's favor, meaning they're going to get a lot more revenue from us, meaning this is a tax increase. That's what this is. Again, what's the definition of a tax cut? Less money going to the government. If more money is going to the government, that's a tax increase. It's pretty simple, pretty easy. We're going to take a break. Don't go anywhere. Back in just a moment.
I would tend to think that that's probably, that was probably the extent of it. But I think the credibility of that particular woman, it was called into question at some point.
It's possible. It's certainly possible. I'm thinking the best case scenario is that, right? The best case scenario is that there was no attempted rape. Best case in the sense of finding him guilty.
Yeah. So
was that there was no rape. It's possible nothing happened. It's possible she made it all up. That would not be unheard of.
It's not unheard of. That's the issue.
No.
You have to have evidence. And if I would tell anything to young girls or to teenagers or whatever, it's when something happens. I mean, you need to go to the authorities sooner rather than later, because that's when you can actually collect the evidence and see what's happened. Now here's the interesting thing, Dan, about this.
Yeah.
Okay, so Joe Biden is in the news, right? He's got these two women that have come out and said he made me uncomfortable. Now, I think I know why.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
If I'm right, and I know I am, and DFA just didn't like the numbers that were presented to the committee, because DFA is now a political arm of the governor, and that's been that way for a very long time. I would encourage the legislature to look at DFA's record, look at how they estimate things, look what really ends up happening. They might as well just be there as a scapegoat. Literally a scapegoat. Like, DFA, go down there and sacrifice yourself for all of our legislative ignorance. That's what a scapegoat is, right? One time a year, here's the scapegoat. We want to make sure all the other sins that we've sacrificed animals to cover, but one time a year we need a scapegoat, and we're going to put the rest of our sins, if we forgot any, on this animal. That's what DFA is now, right? Because you could even probably make the argument that some of these legislators are glad when DFA misleads them on whether or not this internet sales tax is an actual net tax increase or when it actually becomes revenue neutral. You can make the argument that some of these legislators are glad that there's a little misleading going on, because when their constituent comes to them and says, hey, you voted for a net tax increase, they can say, oh, my gosh, well, they can act outraged, and they can say, well, DFA lied to me. I can't believe that they lied to me. I just need to be down there a little bit longer so that I can get a handle on the bureaucracy. I'm sorry, I had to throw that last one in there. I'm trolling. I'm going to be honest. I'm Paul Harrell, the troll, today. The phone number, 870-275-9799. No, but seriously, you do need to think about that, possibility that it's like a scapegoat, and that's what DFA is. That's what these bureaucracies are. They are scapegoats. Like, somebody raises a legitimate point that may derail and go against what the predetermined outcome is, i.e. what the nephew and the governor wants, right? And once that happens, you need a scapegoat. You need a government agency to go down to the end of the table and to essentially say something to give people an excuse to continue moving the train forward in the direction that the governor and the nephew want. And this is how legislation works. This is how it works down there right now, And I mean, this is the era of I don't know. To tell you the truth, in the beginning of this session, I will tell you this: there was more legislators legislating than there are now. I mean, from the House standpoint, there really was, and it did feel different. As things have gotten further along in there, I think the establishment has gotten more of a control, in trying to figure out how to manage people and get the results that they want. Case in point, I mean, the last thing that happened that was really unpredictable was the hang on, let me check the time here. Oh, yeah, 30 seconds. The last thing that happened that was, unpredictable was on Friday, and Friday they voted down the DHS appropriation budget. Yesterday they voted for it with barely 75 votes. What does that say to you? That when they voted for the DHS Obamacare appropriation, they barely got enough votes in the Senate, and then they barely got enough votes in the House to get it through. Anyway, we're going to take a break and be right back with State Representative Vivian Flowers. Don't go anywhere.
These are women on the left. They don't think that Joe Biden is the man to get the Democrat nomination to try to challenge President Trump, and I understand that. However, there are a plethora of photos and videos of Joe Biden making women of all ages very uncomfortable. I don't know. Have you seen these where he's,
I have not.
Oh, man.
I'm going to have to look them up.
Yeah, you have to look them up. I guess my point is, and if you haven't seen them, then, we can't really discuss it, but there's actually evidence of Joe Biden's past behavior that's out there where he clearly touches people and makes them feel, uneasy, uncomfortable.
I know. I had heard about it. I just don't want to speak about it because I haven't read it myself.
Yeah, I understand.
Thank you for alerting me.
Yeah, absolutely. Go check it out. Yeah, the question is evidence.
Tell me what do you want to make out of Joe Biden? I'd be interested.
Oh, well, see, I don't really know. I'm just commenting on it. I don't think there's any crime that's been committed. Again, is it a crime to smell somebody's hair? I mean, but in the left, in today's, in their movement, they're going to destroy Joe Biden. Although, again, go watch those videos. It's extremely creepy of him interacting with some of these women. But my point is, you got to have evidence. Okay, if we're going to go forward, you're at some point you have to have something other than just your word, especially if it happened a long time ago.
Absolutely, and that's what I'm fighting. The idea that you don't have to have evidence, believe women to start, and that solves the problem.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean that could just be we can't do that, and so at some point we have the situation where is it because of a perceived oppressive patriarchal society that we now feel morally obligated to just believe whatever a woman says?
No, I think this is born out of a sense that the police and DAs have not been taking these complaints seriously when they come in, and so a very small, not a tiny fraction, but let's say this policeman I referred to a little while ago says that out of every 100 complaints that come in, 30 result in arrests. 30 in arrest, not in convictions, in arrests. That tells you something. It tells you that the way his department is looking at these things, either the women are not telling the truth or they're deceiving themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Either they're deliberately not telling the truth or they're deceiving themselves. And I think it's a combination of both, and there's good evidence that it's a combination of both.
Last question, Dan. We're talking with Dan Subotnick. Again, the title of your book, Toxic Diversity. Why'd you pick that title? What is toxic about diversity?
Well, because once you say diversity, all discussion shuts down. You can't say you don't like diversity.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Diversity is an all-purpose good. So it's almost etched into the Declaration of Independence, so to speak. So that's why I chose diversity and toxic, because it leads to all kinds of destructive thinking and acts on the part of the people who hold those views. I mean, for example, women have a lot to do. The activities of women have a lot to do with the fact that they're sexual assault. The typical case is a woman goes to a party and she gets drunk, and before you know it, she accepts an invitation or invites the guy into the bedroom. Now, I think that something has to be said to the women about this. You can't just do that and continue, and then the next day wake up and say, I was raped.
Order. In the name of public safety, order. This meeting of the Arkansas State Licensing Board governing state licensing boards is called to order in the name of public safety. What's on the agenda for the day?
We have before us today, per our summons, a representative from the Arkansas State Licensing Board governing cosmetology, cosmetologist, and all things hair care and beauty.
Right. Of course, I remember this. In the name of public safety, ma'am, please state your name for the record, and thank you for appearing before us today.
Yes, my name is Cosmo Glamour Gazette, and I'm here in response to a letter our state board received claiming we're in violation of the Arkansas State Licensing Board governing state licensing boards. In the letter, you claim that our licensing board is in violation of your rules and regulations because we have failed to, quote, pay tribute, end quote, and therefore have not been granted a license by the Arkansas State Licensing Board governing licensing boards to, quote, shake down the Arkansans who have an interest in cosmetology, end quote.
In the name of public safety, order. Yes, Miss Gazette, we sent you that letter because you have not obtained our approval in the form of a license from our board to distribute licenses to the professional class your board strives to protect. In the name of public safety, of course.
Of course.
So, in the name of public safety, and just so we can get this for the record, you do admit and agree with our board, the Arkansas State Licensing Board, governing state licensing boards, that you have not obtained a license, thereby revealing your board of cosmetology to be operating outside our rules, regulations, and authority?
Well, sir, I'm not sure our board agrees that we need a license from your board to continue to shake down, to look out for the public safety of Arkansans.
In the name of public safety.
In the name of public safety.
Well, it seems we are at a bit of an impasse if we are not in agreement that your board owes us tribute.
Sir, maybe we could ask and see if there's a bureaucrat in the house.
Ah, yes. Yes, that would shed some light on things. A bureaucrat. Yeah, in the name of public safety, is there a bureaucrat in the house? We need someone to resuscitate and confirm our authority as the Arkansas State Licensing Board, governing state licensing boards.
Here.
Ah, yes. Oh, good. Come to the end of the table in the name of public safety and state your name for the record, please.
Yes, I am Despot Ringleader, the head of the Bureau governing all state bureaus, and it is my testimony the Arkansas State Licensing Board governing state licensing boards does have the authority to demand tribute in this situation and will provide in exchange a license to say they can continue to operate in the name of public safety.
It's hard to argue when the public safety is put at risk. Very well. We will consider Mrs. Ringleader's testimony as truth, and we will pay tribute in the name of public safety, of course.
In the name of public safety.
In the name of public safety.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
All right, folks, welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for being with us here. Interesting thing that happened in the House Revenue and Tax Committee yesterday. Josh Waters was there. Josh, are you on the line, sir?
Hey, I'm here, Paul. Good morning.
Yeah, 2 days in a row we've had you on the program. We're kind of winding down this program today, but you had some numbers. Well, actually, you presented DFNA's own numbers to the committee yesterday on the internet sales tax. What did those numbers show? Why did you want to present them?
Yeah, so, Paul, last week when we testified on this internet sales tax bill, I went through the numbers, and I thought maybe it was a little confusing for members because there's so many pieces to this internet sales tax bill. There's tax increases, there's some tax cuts, down the road. So what I did was I put together the DFNA estimates on a spreadsheet, and I presented that to the committee. At the bottom of the spreadsheet, I mentioned last week in my comments, and we've been talking about how the internet sales tax is way underestimated. So in a separate part of the, spreadsheet at the bottom, there's an additional, estimate. Okay, if you think it's underestimated, look at this. But what I told them was even, let's just look at the DFA numbers. And that's what I read off. That's what I, showed them in the spreadsheet and showed how this was a net tax increase until about 2025, 2026. And then I think you played it earlier. Almost immediately after I did that, the DFNA official got up there and then said, don't trust this estimate, don't trust these numbers, and pointed to that separate estimate that was not what I had just presented, and read off to the committee and highlighted. So it really conflated the issue, and it was confusing to me because it was their numbers, but don't trust the numbers because the separate estimate, which were not their numbers. So I think all it did was, lead the committee to question and probably throw their hands up. Well, what can we believe? I think that was probably the goal is, what can we believe? So let's throw our hands up and not believe anything. But Paul, the numbers are important because the numbers reflect the money that is coming out of the pockets of Arkansans and flowing to government. And they're important for legislators to know. And I wanted to highlight that, and it didn't go very well. So it was very frustrating. I confronted DFA official after the meeting, and he admitted, yeah, those numbers that you presented and read off, those are the DFNA estimates, but we disagreed with this. And that turned into, well, this isn't a tax increase. And at that point, I was just, we'll agree to disagree.
So then they said, hang on a second. I'm trying to say, so you confront them about them, apparently misleading the committee. And then when you push them on it, they say, well, we don't think this is a tax increase. Now, those are completely two different things. One's an argument over the numbers, and the other's a political statement.
Right. And then at that point, I knew where we were at. So I agreed to disagree. I, said, well, it's obviously a new tax right now. There's no requirement for a company to collect and remit the sales tax that's paid by people at the point of sale on an online purchase. Right. That's why we have this bill. If this is not a new tax, if this is not a new bill, then we would not have this bill. Mm-hmm. And so at that point, it was clear where we were at. And it even got to the point where it was insinuated, by describing this as a new tax or a tax increase, was in some way advocating criminal behavior, tax evasion. And so, it was clear at that point where we were, and I just agreed to disagree and moved on. But I wanted to highlight the numbers, like I said, Paul, because the numbers are the money that's coming out of the pocketbooks of Arkansans. And it's a big, big number.
Can you tell us those numbers one more time, Josh?
Sure.
When it comes to a net tax increase until 2027.
Yeah. So when you look in the first fiscal year, because that's what you're seeing over and over, the first fiscal year, they have all the tax increases. Let's go ahead and put those in effect. Let's have an emergency clause in this bill to implement the internet sales tax July 1. So first fiscal year, we're looking at it, all the pieces here, $42.5 million total net tax increase. Fiscal year 2021, $38.5 million. $18.8 million fiscal year 2022. That's when the corporate income tax cuts start really hitting. $8.9 million fiscal year 2023. And when you look down the road, it's not until fiscal year 2027 when you add in the accommodations intermediary piece, which is in an amendment. When you add that in, it's not until fiscal year 2027 that this is a net tax decrease.
Wow.
And I think that's important for people to know. Now, if you look at additional numbers, and Paul, those are DFNA's estimates. Those are numbers that I think are probably low, but that's what we're, that's what you go with. They control the numbers. If you consider, and if you think, okay, yeah, the internet sales tax is lower, it's even more than that. But, just look at the DFNA numbers, which is what I read off to the committee, or those numbers I just shared with you. This is a net tax increase until fiscal year 2027 when you add in with that amendment the accommodations intermediary.
Was there any?
So it's very clear.
Was there any discussion yesterday over their financial impact statement in general? The fact that it's the exact same for an old bill that didn't have all of the new language that's going to generate even more money to the government, and yet they're using an old financial impact statement.
Yeah, there's been no discussion basically of the numbers other than what I presented. Really, there's a question that kind of led to the question was, what's the net on this? And Mercer Douglas said last week, well, it's a $30 million cut in fiscal year 2028. But I did ask DFNA about that because that was the whole point of part of my argument last week was, okay, in the tax task force, you had draft legislation for an internet sales tax, but it did not include these marketplace facilitators, this third-party language. That was not included in the bill. And the fiscal impact statement said $47 million, total. Then this session, they come back with the internet sales tax bill. They add the marketplace facilitator language, same fiscal impact. So I asked them about that, and they said, well, when their explanation was, first time I've heard this, was, well, when we issued that in the tax task force, we mentioned it in a letter that we're assuming that there was going to be additional language for facilitators. And so then I'm like, well, that's even more confusing to issue a fiscal impact based on a bill, but then anticipating there's going to be additional language in the session. So, at the end of the day, Paul, it's just very confusing, I think, for the average person, the average listener. But at the end of the day, Senate Bill 576 is a net tax increase, period. And until fiscal year, what did I say, 2027?
Yeah, I don't think anyone cares. I mean, honestly, I think, I'm sorry. I don't think anyone cares about a net, a revenue neutral 2027. Like, I think people care about what are my taxes going to be in 2019, 2020, 2021. And, like you said, they've got all these tax increases to go into effect this year. The July 1st gas tax July 1st will be the internet sales tax. October will be the gas tax increases. We'll start paying those at the pump. And yet the tax cuts, we're told, we've got to wait on those. It really illustrates the fact that we have a budget crisis in this state that nobody's really being forthcoming about.
Yeah, I mentioned, I think these numbers show the headline today, revenue smashes record. Paul, we have a spending problem in the state, not a revenue problem. The people are taxed enough already. I encourage them to reach out to the legislators. I should be voting probably today or tomorrow, depending on how they do the amendment on Senate Bill 576, internet sales tax increase on the people.
All right. Josh Waters, it's always great. Keep up the good work, my friend. I appreciate the work you're doing.
All right. Thanks, Paul.
All righty. Thank you. Folks, we're going to continue our coverage, going to be monitoring things. Let's just give you a little update. I am told that the Earned Income Tax Credit bill, Senator Jim Hendren, the one that the Democrats all love, and the Earned Income Tax Credit, not Jim Hendren. I'm sorry. The Democrats love the Earned Income Tax Credit. They may love that. They may love Jim too. I don't really know. The Earned Income Tax Credit has now been stripped out of Senator Jim Hendren's bill that got out of the Senate via amendment. So has the tobacco tax increases. And so now it's just a straight vape tax. Originally, the vape tax was going to be 67%. Then I think they dropped it to 47%. Now it's 30%. So now it's just a vape tax bill. And I understand Senator Hendren's going to run that in the House committee tomorrow. Now, I don't know if he has the votes still. I'm not really sure. Can any business at all, out there right now that's not being taxed, could you absorb a 67% tax increase on your product and then still sell it for a markup of about two times markup? Could you survive a 67% increase? So what about a 47? What about a 30? I don't think they could survive a 30% increase myself. I expect the vape tax industry to oppose this, continue to oppose it as they should, because again, it's just more money to the government. They see something out there that's helping people. They see something out there that's popular, and they want to reach out and tax it because they're actually at this.